Hello and welcome to another episode of Football and Grits. It's Football and Grits Day. I'm told there's also another holiday. I dressed today because it's playoff week. We get our first playoff rankings as the college football playoff trophy. I don't know if this is giving the same vibes as Rob Lowe in the NFL hat, but
It's the closest we can get. I like it. Yeah.
I think so. I'm not a Halloween guy, Brody.
Oh,
How
I
many
am.
times do you think I've dressed up in my life for
Probably
Halloween?
two, but I'm guessing. But I love
Three. That's
Halloween.
close.
Yeah.
Three. I
What
feel
were you?
like perhaps. One time it was like a Greek god situation, and then one time this will really date me. I dressed up as American Idol finalist Ruben Studdard after he went on and this aged poorly,
That's a
the
deep
Subway
cut.
the Subway Jared diet because I was not quite as large. Didn't age
Really?
great, but at the
Well,
time it killed. And I believe this was like a junior in high school situation. And then there was one other time that I forget. But my daughter's going as a strawberry tonight, so we'll see how that goes.
you're wearing that. I'm dressed in a flannel as a guy, I guess, who eats grits. I don't know.
That or I think you just look like a sports writer. So
Yeah,
nice
that's
costume. I appreciate it. But Brody, we got a lot to get to. It's
yes,
a
we
big
do.
week in the
Big
SEC.
week. It's our
This is
Super Bowl.
literally the biggest week of the year. Until the SEC championship game, I'm not sure we're going to have a bigger week. And to celebrate, Brody, we had to bring in a guest. We had to do it. And we had to bring in
Guest.
none other than Seth Emerson, our Georgia writer. There's some Georgia business to get to. Seth, welcome to Football and Grits, coming to us from the glorious Athens, Georgia. College game day in
Rainy
tow.
Athens,
Yeah,
Georgia
it's
today.
raining here too.
Yeah.
College game day in tow. More
Yep.
importantly, Seth Emerson also there. The Georgia Bulldogs, a big week. Seth, what are the Georgia vibes right now? Is it sort of we've got the belt and we're fine, or is there a little bit of fear emanating from the facility over there?
I'd say the vibe is a little more uncertainty, like what to expect here, because probably honestly from both sides. I think it helps Georgia a lot. It helps them schematically for what we're going to see Saturday, that they've seen Alabama play them, in addition to Kentucky and other teams that play good defense, try to actually play good defense, and so they have something on film. But I think it also helps mentally, as in that gets Georgia's attention. That gets these players' attention that Tennessee beat Alabama. That has the fans' attention. I mean, you'll hear some fans that are overconfident. You'll hear some fans that are just ready to just to lay their money on Tennessee. But I also, you talked about game day. Something I wrote yesterday, and something I've been thinking, for a while, is that Georgia's not going to be in awe of this game. They were just in the national championship, and
it's a bigger game
before that, the SEC championship. It is a big game. On paper, it is the biggest game in Sanford Stadium history. There has never been a top three, both teams ranked in the top three matchup in Sanford Stadium history. On the other hand, how many stadiums have ever seen that? You don't see 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3 in the regular season very much. So Georgia's not going to be in awe of this moment. I mean, Notre Dame came in here in 2019, and people from outside the Southeast were trying to say, "Oh, Athens has never seen anything like this." I'm like, it's a big game every week, basically. Every time it's an SEC opponent, not named Vanderbilt or certain other teams at the lower end. So, but it's definitely, I mean, it's got a huge game 5, and I think an understanding that this is in a lot of ways probably Georgia's, not, I wouldn't say season, but regular season. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I think if people think about it, I'm not sure a team that loses at home and doesn't make its conference championship game is going to make the playoff.
Yeah, I think the winner of this game is going to have a hard time not making the playoffs.
Yes.
Also, a tip for fans, anyone listening, remember this week, folks, the polls do not matter. These rankings are the only thing that matters. I know everybody wants their team to be respected. I'm telling you right now, I could go get a roll of toilet paper Write down 25 random teams, and it would have the same amount of relevance as the coaches poll or the AP poll. The one tonight, the secret poll, the 13 secret people in a room, that's not really a poll. It's a summarized ranking. I've written about the process. It's a very weird process that they do to make the rankings. It's the only thing that matters. But Seth, does Georgia care at all this week about that?
About the ranking?
Would they if it comes out Tuesday night and Tennessee's number 1, Georgia's number 2, do they care?
I think it probably depends on the person, but the tone of my answer probably tells you that, I think we go back to this team has had 2 very recent seasons where they were number 1 pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
That the playoff rankings were out, and much of the when the AP and the coaches rankings were out in 2017, 2021, didn't stop them from getting their butt kicked by Alabama in the SEC championship, then didn't stop them from going and winning the national championship. I think that kind of, there's a lot of been there, done that for Georgia.
And also I feel like we're at the point now where people have learned, like, it all gets figured out. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Especially
now,
this week. Who cares where,
exactly.
Like in our internal thing, I was playing with it yesterday. At first I had Tennessee won, then I switched up to Ohio State. And then at the end I went to Georgia, and I did that despite the fact I didn't want to look like a homer.
Yeah.
But I looked at it.
You're a
and
homer
I said,
now. Sorry.
I think Georgia still has the best win. Like Oregon maybe not been a neutral site game, but 49-3 is different than a field goal exchange in the last minute at home. And they have 4 wins away from home, 2 of them neutral site.
And I think,
then it was like, who cares? Who cares? Like they'll sort it out.
Who cares? Yeah.
And I think there was a temptation to brand Oregon as a fraud after that game, and it has been the exact opposite. But I did want to ask you about that game, Seth, because I think Georgia's the national champ. They're reloading, and then they make this huge statement in week 1, and people are kind of just like, "Oh, well, Georgia's back. Georgia's great again. Georgia's the best team in the country." And then they haven't really played a real showcase game in the 6 weeks since then. And they've had a bunch of games. Well, I say a bunch. They've had a few games where you've kind of been like, they've looked pretty good against teams that they should beat up on, the South Carolinas, the Vanderbilts. The Missouri game, obviously, is the biggest question mark. They looked a little ugly against Kent State until they ran away late. What do you make of this Georgia team? I don't want to say it's as simple as how does this team compare to last year, but I think Georgia has a pretty good case, along with Ohio State, as the best overall team to start. I don't think they have the best resume. I think you can make a case that they have the best win. But overall, I mean, how good is this team, Seth?
So they came out of the gates obviously strong, and I don't just mean Oregon. The next week was Samford, so 33-0. And then the third week they went into South Carolina, and I think the final score was 49-7. Might have been 48-7. And I think a lot of that was the reverse of a hangover of a national championship. It was, are you going to follow this up? Are you going to be as good? And they came out of the gates emotionally strong. Apparently Kirby Smart's offseason message resonated, which was last year's team won the title. You guys didn't. You guys haven't won anything. And then I think after that, you saw the youth on this team, the immaturity emerge, where they do kind of, lay down for a little bit, like for just stretches, like quarters. I think it was the 4th week was Kent State. And honestly, that was a case of turnovers. The total yardage in that game was still way in Georgia's favor. But then everyone expected, all right, now they're going to take out their frustrations on Missouri, and instead almost lost the game. Since then, they've been mostly on point. The Florida game, it was just the third quarter where 28-3 went to 28-20, but then the offense goes down the field and scores. The defense answers. I think the best way to put it is that since the third week, since those first 3 games and the Vanderbilt game, which was wire to wire, they've turned it on when they needed to. It's like they flip a switch and say, okay, wait, we might lose here to Missouri. We better wake up. Now, they should have woken up before the fourth quarter. They were still down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. but can you flip that switch if you suddenly found yourself down 3 touchdowns to Tennessee, or even 2 touchdowns to Tennessee? And I wrote this for my game column Saturday night from Jacksonville. We don't know if their ability to rally back and to answer is a feature of this year's team, because remember, last year's team never had to do that in the regular season. They beat Clemson in that 10-3 game and then rolled in 11 straight. And then in the SEC championship, when Alabama punched them in the mouth, what did they do? They folded because they weren't, they hadn't gone through any of that in the regular season. So is what Georgia is doing this year a feature, as in this team has something or is learning something that last year's team didn't have to? Or is it a sign that this team does have some flaws that are about to be exposed?
So then where are you at with that? Because I think my read is like they just haven't, even though you're right, like you shouldn't have those quarters. You shouldn't, you are a defending champ though at the end of the day. It is hard to get going every week. Like, are you at the point that going into this game, like they are obviously going to get up for this? This is arguably the first game they've had to since Oregon. Like, do you think they are a team that just, when they come out, are probably the best team in the country? Or are you at a point where you actually do think there are some of those flaws?
I don't know that they are. I mean, I certainly don't think they're the best team in the country, but I don't know that there's not a dominant team this year. Yeah. But I'm not sure we should rule out that Tennessee ends up being that dominant team, because if it wasn't Tennessee, a team we've been used to like being average at best, literally, and mostly mediocre, we'd look at this team and, David, like you wrote, like say this is 2019 LSU.
You're probably right.
I think we're going to find out a lot on Saturday. Ultimately, I think questions are answered. Although I could see Georgia beating Tennessee and then going into Mississippi State the following week and losing.
That's a great call. You should put some money on that. Yeah.
I said before the year that was the one that was kind of like, watch
That's a
that
weird
one.
matchup. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. I think my main question, Seth, is, Alabama doesn't have – they're not as explosive as they've been in the past. But this Georgia team is efficient, but you don't see the quick strike haymakers that you do obviously with Tennessee. And I think you're going to see at least a couple of those in this game. I'll be there down in Athens. I'm excited to see this game. I'm excited to see, more importantly, Seth in person. I haven't seen you in a while. But I'm intrigued to see that. Ken, do you feel like this Georgia team has that inside of them at some point? Are we going to see a Ladd McConkey 70-yard score? Are we going to see Darnell Washington stomp someone's face into the dirt and then stiff arm a safety and go 65 yards? Or because I really think coming into this, for one, I think Tennessee's defensive front is better than people realize. And I don't think that Georgia's going to be able to bully them in the same way that they can a lot of teams. I think Georgia will be able to run the ball, but not really at will and just 10-play drive, 11-play drive. I think they're going to have to hit some balls. Does this Georgia team have that in them?
Georgia at parts this season has shown a little bit of everything. The first 3 weeks, it was this quick passing, outside passing, short passing game. They have really emphasized downfield passing the last 5 weeks, which is, your percentage goes down. You have more risk for interceptions, but every now and then they'll uncork a big play. They've missed A.D. Mitchell, who was healthy for the Oregon game. He's the guy like George Pickens. People think of downfield passing game and they think of just, put Willie Galt on the end and send him downfield and throw him a pass. No, it's not that. You need a guy who is a threat both to go downfield, but also to cut short the pattern and catch the sideline pass. You have to play that side of the field differently. You have to bring a safety over. You have to play a certain coverage. And they haven't had that with A.D. Mitchell out. And if he can't play this week, that takes away a dimension. But they can go deep if they need to. They aren't, like you said, they're not very explosive, but they're kind of, I'm not sure efficient, honestly, is a fair way to say it. It's almost like that's like when people talk about a quarterback being a game manager. Like,
couldn't agree more.
They're an explosive offense. They're just they're the one difference is they get chunk plays. If you look at Georgia, I think Georgia may rank first in the nation. I wrote it in like plays of 10 yards or more.
Yeah.
When you go up to 30 yards or more, Tennessee's first and Georgia drops a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with Georgia that's going to be so fascinating is that at different times this year, they've been able to do different things. You know, they were able to turn to the run on that one drive against Florida when they needed to, when it got 28-20 the other night, the same way they were able to go to the run at Missouri. But in that Missouri game also, Bennett hit on some good intermediate passes. They've got those tight ends, and you can't defend those, period. But you can't throw to them every play. Yeah, I mean, the big question is going to be, can they actually run the ball well enough? But we don't know how they're going to try to run the ball, because they could go back. Georgia could end up going back to the way they did it against Oregon and South Carolina, which was runs to the outside, short passes, and get guys in space. Or they could keep trying to go downfield. We're not really sure.
A preview of later this week on The Athletic. I've been talking to coaches around the league about Georgia and Tennessee, and sort of the both coaches so far. I've talked to a handful. Both coaches that I've talked to so far brought up that they felt like Georgia really misses James Cook, which kind of surprised me. That they don't have a game breaker at running back. What do you make of that assessment? And can Kenny McIntosh go to another level? Is the offensive line good enough to let him look like a game breaker? What are you expecting out of that running game?
McIntosh is the closest they have to Cook. I think something they've missed is that Kendall Milton has been out for the better part of the last 3 or 4 games. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head exactly how many, but they've developed the other guy, Dejon Edwards, and they've got another freshman who was a top 50 recruit, Ransom Robinson. But those are the younger guys. They need the guys that can kind of complement him, McIntosh, the way that Zamir White did last year. And that, Cook played off that and more in the passing game. And also, they also ran him inside zone, the way they do with Kenny McIntosh, because the outside was a threat enough that it was almost a surprise when you send that guy in there. And that's how you break some runs, is through the middle with a speedy guy. Kendall Milton isn't like Zamir White. He's more of a athletic guy, but when you have 2 of those, it helps. But they're also built differently. I mean, if you put James Cook on this year's offense, that'd be great. But this year's offense is using the second tight end, Darnell Washington, more than they did last year. And this year's offense doesn't have Pickens as it did in the playoff run, or Mitchell like it did during the regular season. But they've got some wide receivers a little more, and they've got a full year of Bennett. Like that's the other thing, is they've got Bennett as the guy who was the quarterback, the number 1 in the offseason. They could build around him. They're not kind of adjusting the game plan on the fly like they were in 2021 when they suddenly realized we're going to start Bennett. This year, it's been built around that. And I think there's honestly a lot of signs that the offense has maybe spent some time, like I'm not going to say sleepwalking or whatever, but there's some times I think that they've tried some things when they may have consciously said, we think we're going to win this game, so we're going to tool around a little bit and try this, try that. Whereas in the Oregon game, they came out and said, we need to do this to win, and you saw the results.
I think that's the right take, by the way. I feel like everyone's like the sleepwalking. It's like, no, they had 8 weeks to kind of like figure out how to be more versatile on offense. But now I'm going to preface this question with a flaw in the Georgia defense, to be clear, is like they're 50th instead of 8th. So like take this with a grain of salt. But the only thing that even like remotely looks like it might be like a question is there's been some explosiveness on defense allowed, I think 70th in run explosiveness allowed. Explain for me, is that an actual problem that you're seeing? Is that something that that you see Tennessee might be able to exploit, or is that more outliers in games that they might have been sleepwalking?
No, I mean, they've given up 22 points to Kent State, 22 points to Missouri, 20 points to Florida. They didn't give up those kind of points in the regular season last year. I mean, they're not as dominant. Now, they haven't had Jalen Carter for much of the season. He came back against Florida. He played on third downs, and you could tell right away they were different with him there. If he can play on first downs and second downs against Tennessee, that'll help a lot. But in the secondary, they're not as strong. They don't have Lewis Seen back there. They don't have Darian Kendrick, who was also drafted at cornerback. they're solid, I think, in the back. And with Malachi Starks, they have a guy who's 5-star freshman who's playing like it. Christopher Smith, they have a savvy veteran. Keely Ringo, another guy's going to be a first rounder at cornerback. But they're susceptible in the secondary, just like everybody in America.
True.
Everybody. Like, is Georgia going to give up points on Saturday? Yep, they're going to. Period. Like I wrote 4 weeks ago or something that like Georgia Tennessee could be a 45-40 type game. And I had some Georgia fans say, "Oh, come on, no way, anybody's going to score that many points on the Georgia defense." I'm like, no, there's a way. It'll probably happen. And I'll guarantee you right now, if Kirby Smart's told you're going to win this game 45-40, you go, all right, well, we got to 45. Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to explore this in a story probably today. Like in 2019, Georgia ran into LSU and Joe Burrow. And they thought they had a really good defense that year. They were decimated the way Burrow and that offense did everybody. How much did they tweak on defense to fight that? A little bit here and there. But the main thing they did? They went out and got a better offense.
By the way, you wrote that night. Night you wrote they have to change right now. And
yes,
look what happened.
I was looking up that story that I wrote, and it was very prescient. And not because I'm a smart guy, because I'm not. It was, and I didn't know they were going to go hire Todd Monken, but they did. But they also started opening up the offense in the Sugar Bowl before Monken was even hired. That game was a wake up call to Kirby, and the wake up call is you don't fight these great offenses by. I mean, you try to adjust on defense, try to stop them, but they're going to score. You don't adjust by shortening the game with a good running game and man ball and physical and dominating stretches. You fight them by getting an offense that can answer them. And this 2022 Georgia team has that. 2019 Georgia team did not.
I'm very excited for this game, Seth. I wrote about it this morning. I wrote this morning, in The Athletic. I think ultimately there's so many stakes beyond just being a number 1 versus number 2 game. From the Tennessee perspective, you have really, beyond all doubt, Tennessee is back. Tennessee is not only back, but if Tennessee wins this game, they have a case as the best team in the country, certainly the best wins this historic season. And if Georgia wins, we can lose 5 first-round picks on our defense, win a national championship, and we're still the king. Like the game itself is going to be great, but the storylines around it, beyond just these are 2 really good teams, the big picture aspect of it is very compelling. I cannot wait to see it. I cannot wait to see Seth. Seth, we will let you get to interviews and talk to Kirby Smart and offer up our subscribers some more insights. So thank you, Seth, for joining the show and your insight.
Thank you for having me.
We haven't gone deep on Georgia because they haven't had a showcase game.
It's been they're too obvious to talk about. So it's like, what do we say? And then we brought you in as the expert. Final question. You have kids. What are you being for Halloween with the kids? Or are you not dressing up?
I haven't decided if I'm dressing up. I may just walk them around. The only thing I remember last year, I'll leave you with this. Last year for Halloween, a neighbor of mine came. A guy wasn't dressed, just pulled down his jacket to reveal a G logo and said, "I'm going as something very scary this year. A Georgia fan with hope."
Nice.
And it worked out. So.
That's perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Seth. This was fantastic and so informative. We really appreciate it.
Yes. Brody, I don't know if I've told you this. I'm very excited for this football game.
Sorry, I like calling you out when you just say that. You know what? I'm going to say it's going to be a good game. Okay. All right.
Listen, I know a lot of people are scared to say it, but I think this is going to be a game that a lot of people are going to want to watch on Saturday. I know that's a contrarian take, but it's going to be there. But I love contrasting styles. I think these teams are very, very different. I think there's going to be a lot of points in this ball game, and keep an eye on The Athletic because this week there's going to be a very interesting story. I'm already learning a lot about these 2 teams and talking to coaches around the league about them. So keep an eye on that. Brody.
You know what I'm most waiting? I was going to ask one thing though.
Go ahead.
I actually am asking you this from some of your reporting.
yeah.
And maybe this hasn't come up. like Georgia, like he said, Georgia can give up points and all that this year.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it, like they are the best in the country at stopping teams, inside the 40, right? Like you can get your yards. Oregon, you saw it, right? But you're not. That's what. And I feel like there's a like 2019 LSU was the year that I think we all finally got a little smarter about this. It's like, guys, modern defense is not holding teams to 200 yards. Like that does not exist anymore. It's let you get your yards to some extent, stop in the 40s. And Georgia doesn't allow that. Like, have you learned much, I guess, in your reporting? And maybe the answer is no, but like about that aspect of it, about like how Tennessee can, because Tennessee's amazing at finishing drives. I'm just curious what you take from that matchup.
The coaches I've talked to think Tennessee is going to win or get close to winning. I kind of feel the same way. I feel the same way going into this game as I did going into the Bama game from a Tennessee perspective. I think Georgia matches up better. It's been interesting to talk to them because they feel very similarly to the way that I do, which is I feel like Georgia matches up with Tennessee a little bit better than Alabama does. They have a little bit of a more complete offense. I think the Alabama's offensive line issues I thought were really going to give them trouble in terms of just pressure. And we saw that Bryce Young made some magical plays.
They were in that game because Bryce Young's a magician.
Yes, really. I didn't think Tennessee would blitz them like that. And if they do that to Georgia, I'll be a little surprised, but you never really know. Yeah. But I feel the same way in that if the turnovers are equal and Tennessee plays, their A- game, they're going to be in it in the fourth quarter. I think and then it's just who can make a play to win this game, because that's what I think it's going to come down to. I think the line is too big. I think there's going to be a lot of points. Not to preview our pick of the week segment at the end of the show, which we have some mea culpas coming on that one, Brody. But but yeah, I this is just I'm excited. This is the most fun part of the season because this is when you start. We pretty much know kind of.
It's been 8 weeks of asking who's good, and it's like now it's just
we're gonna find out. Yeah,
everyone. No, but even more than that, everyone's fully formed, and we get to see just like we know these are the two best teams. I feel like we're very confident in that, and it's just like we get to watch them play football. It's awesome. And I think where I'm at is like. I think, and the coaches you're talking to are probably right. And you're probably right. Because if there's anything I've learned the last few years, it's like, it's not who's the best overall team. A lot of the times it's who is the best superpower. I think I'm coming around on that thinking. It's like, even if Georgia's better, having that offense, like Georgia's defense was last year, that was the best superpower. Like this year, it's like that one superpower is more important than maybe Georgia's some of their parts. So you might be right. But my thing is, I do think Georgia's going to be able to bully them a little bit. Like they are that good up in those areas. And I kind of think Georgia has been able to just like try stuff, have fun with it, and like figure it out. I kind of think Georgia wins by a few scores. It's my gut feeling here.
Maybe. I think you're underestimating the Rodney Garner factor. I think Tennessee's defensive line is really underrated. They don't have that standout guy, but they have some really good. They have a bunch of bodies. They have like 8 guys that are like above average. They don't have that Will Anderson, that Jordan Davis, that guy that everybody, that David Njabo or that Aiden Hutchinson, who people are just like, oh my gosh, this guy's unbelievable. But they got a bunch of guys, Amari Thomas, Byron Young, Tyler Barron, guys that are just like above average.
I'm with you on that completely. Like they have.
And also people have got to stop with the Tennessee has the worst pass defense in the country.
That is no longer accurate. It's no longer accurate. It was accurate going into LSU in terms of the numbers, right? In terms of numbers, it was like, that's a thing. And now we have like 4 games since then against really good teams. Here's the thing, if you're
beating the crap out of teams, they will throw the ball a ton on you because they're behind. Guys, stop using total defense, total yards per attempt. I was using like advanced passing efficiency,
explosiveness, but you're right.
People are killing me with this stuff. It's like Tennessee has a average defense with an above average defensive front that can cause havoc and doesn't let people run on them. That's just what they are. They're not good at corner. Or they might have found something with Danico Slaughter. I wrote about that this morning at The Athletic too. We'll see. Brody.
The only thing though I want to counter, and by the way, I want to get to your question, but last comment is I agree with you. That D-line is way underrated, but they have not faced a single team that can abuse you up front. Like they've faced good teams. Oh my God, their schedule's been great, but none of them are teams that their strength is their O-line. I'm not saying that means they're going to do badly. That's the only thing.
On paper, I think Alabama should have been better than that at running the ball, but they haven't really shown that a ton.
Like Alabama's like 103rd in stuff rate on offense. Like they get stuffed.
Yeah. So we'll see. You may be right. Brody.
Yes.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, not only to have an SEC East championship game above everything else, You'll be in Tiger Stadium, Death Valley, for the SEC West championship game. De facto, but still, we'll see.
Yeah.
Ole Miss might have something to say about that, but certainly the team will be in the driver's seat. Last week, I think LSU, beating Ole Miss the way they did made me perk up. But I'm still not all the way in that, I think they can really go toe-to-toe with Alabama. I think Alabama, even though they're flawed, they got to go on the road again. They might have 16 penalties again. Still, I trust Bryce Young a lot more than I do Jayden Daniels. We'll see.
Definitely.
As we look at that game, what does LSU need to do to not only make that game competitive, but win it and really, kind of like Tennessee did, change the entire narrative of their entire season?
Yeah, it's like there are two competing thoughts I have to wrestle with in this game, because it's like, in a lot of ways, if you're going off what LSU looks like lately, they match up well in a lot of ways. Not saying they should be favorite, God no, or anything like that, but this should be a ball game. The other hand, there is a realistic part of this that's as much as Jayden Daniels has turned a corner and the last two games looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the country for 2 weeks, it is against two not very good defenses. It is, you do have to, this is the first time where it's okay, you've made these growth. Is it real? And I think that's a fair question to ask. To your question, it's okay, what's LSU's biggest weakness? Passing defense. A great pass offense can have success. As we've talked about almost every week, and you've been on this, Alabama isn't stretching you over the top like those other teams. And it's LSU's pass defense is good at, in the box and whatnot. It's just not good, on the back end. Alabama's not going to beat you that way. And the weird thing with this LSU defense is, and it's why data is just irrelevant this week, right? Is that LSU changes every week who they are to some extent. There are weeks where you're man, that run game's terrible against Florida and Tennessee. And then there are games against, Florida State and, of course, Ole Miss, where they focus on the run and shut down the run and look like one of the best defenses in the SEC. You don't know what defense you're getting in a lot of ways. But now that they found something with this Harold Perkins situation, it's that defense can. Harold Perkins and Ojulari on the field together, which I think against Alabama matchup-wise they should be. That is a really good defense. But the answer to your question is, which Jayden Daniels do you get? Because if it's that Jayden Daniels, this is a top 10 LSU team, that specific version. And that version should be a 5-point underdog, not a 13-point. So there's a lot of ways I think LSU matches up well. But if Jayden Daniels isn't up to it and hasn't made that real progress, then it doesn't matter. LSU loses by 24.
We got a question, a comment, I guess, from the chat. I'm going to give it a shot at pronouncing this. I believe it's Elias Gray.
So please correct us. Yeah,
please. This is, I like LSU as a team, but this feels like a classic Nick Saban 30-point road win against a team with a newly found hope. I don't think Alabama has that in them. I don't think Alabama can blow out really good teams. They're not a score at will team. Bryce Young has a ton on his back, but Alabama, when they play teams that are in that top third of the SEC, I just don't think they have that in them. They don't have that explosiveness to beat teams 42-10 and 45-17. I don't think that's there. I feel like Alabama can win this game 38 to maybe 34 to 17-20 maybe, but I don't think they have that smack you in them. I really don't.
Well, I guess the question then is do you consider LSU to be in the tier of those teams we're talking about, that can make you, but or are they closer?
I think you have to, because they have enough athletes where they can't, when Alabama does that to teams, it's because
I was going to say, do you put them closer to an Arkansas or
it's all because it's on the line. When they beat the heck out of teams, it's because the quarterback's snapping the ball and there's two guys in his face immediately the entire night, and the running backs are getting 7-8 yards a clip. Bryce Young is standing back there, hanging out, deciding what he wants to dress up as Halloween. Trying on a couple costumes. Trying on a couple costumes, figuring that out, and then throwing the ball downfield to a wide open receiver. LSU is not going to let him do that. I just don't think that scenario is there. I don't know that I'm believing in LSU with a real chance to win this game. It's because I don't really believe that they have that ability to beat the Georgias, the Tennessees, the Alabamas. I think they can hang, but I don't know that they can have that capability. I think they can beat the Ole Misses and the teams that are kind of in that sort of class 1B sort of. But I think LSU's proven that they deserve to be in that tier, but I still don't necessarily see the upside of that team.
And really the wrinkle we're leaving out is this is Kelly's first Nick Saban matchup with an SEC roster and all that. Point.
And there's a lot on the line. I don't think I thought there'd be this much on the line in this Alabama.
Exactly. And I have a piece coming out this week on like looking back at the past two Kelly Saban matchups, and obviously Bama routes Notre Dame, but like how much of that was Saban beating Kelly and how much is Alabama was just twice as talented as Notre Dame. We'll see. But the thing that's going to be interesting, because I've been around LSU so many times where 2018 is the best example. It's actually 2018 feels very similar to this LSU team of like, they're good. All this hope. I think they went in that game like playoff number 4, and you just saw Alabama show how much more prepared they are, how much smarter they are, and just embarrassed them, annihilated them. And I wonder, like, you know, it doesn't seem like this LSU offense is like schematically brilliant or anything like that. Like, I don't know. I don't think it happens, but do they go up against Brian Kelly and show like, no, we've got you figured out? And that's the scenario where like, there is a possibility where they know exactly how to defend Jane Daniels and hold them to like 10 points. That is possible. So that's the only way, because I'm with you in the principle that like I don't think Bama's putting up 42 this week. I would be pretty surprised by
that. Well, Brody, you know, I'm going to go out on a limb again. It's going to be a good game. I'm excited to see it. I don't know.
I actually do think this will be a good game. Like
I'll be intrigued by it. I think it's going to be a tight game in the first half, and then Bama wins it. They kind of keep them at arm's length.
The kind of game where you're like always within 7 to 10.
Yeah, kind of something like that. That's where it kind of feels like we're going to be, where like LSU sort of acquits themselves, but never really puts Bama in the, oh no, we're going to lose this game mode, where it's like, we'll see. Which
LSU feels a lot probably like take.
That feels like a lot of the LSU Bama games over the years, honestly, where it's like, even when LSU had better teams and we had better Alabama teams, because I don't think this is an Alabama team that's very confusing, because I do think they still do have, we'll see. Will Anderson hasn't had quite the year that people thought he would have, but Bryce Young's still one of, if not the best overall players in the country. But there's just not, this Bama team doesn't have a ton that excites you compared to other Bama teams. So we'll see.
Walt Clark says there should be a rule that LSU can't be a double-digit home dog in a night game. Seems impossible.
Fair point.
The only thing I'm interested, though, and I think I talked about this before, like the first 7 weeks of the year, Tiger Stadium just was not Tiger Stadium. It was kind of weird. And I'm a firm believer Tiger Stadium is probably number 1 when it's rocking of toughest place to play. But it hadn't been that. Ole Miss during the day, it looked better. But I do want to see, it's a call out to Tiger Stadium, man. I want to see it rocking because I like watching a good crowd. Because that is a factor. But at the same time, I've always had a long belief that because LSU never beat Bama the first for 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. That Alabama always does well in Tiger Stadium because Nick Saban's going to get them up for that. He's going to get them rallied for that. Nick Saban knows how to play in Tiger Stadium. He thrives there. And I always predicted that the one time LSU would win would be in Tuscaloosa because that's maybe when you can catch them. And that's exactly what happened. So I don't really have a point to that, but I'm just intrigued to see because it's 13.5 does seem like too much, right? It kind of does. But to our point, this game's hard to figure out.
I feel like LSU needs to lean in, by the way, in their game environment. And I feel like in pregame introductions or in a pregame hype video, they need to lean in and embrace the my family aspect of the right. I'd like to see that personally. I feel like because they've been so good on the field, a lot of the offseason stuff with the dancing and the family and all that has sort of redeemed itself, even though the general college football fan, Brian Kelly's probably not their favorite head coach, more likely than not. When they're good, that stuff seems a little bit more endearing, I suppose.
Yes.
And more funny rather than oh, is this going to be a disaster?
That's true. In February, it was oh no, what's this? Now
it's
I did notice those first few months, you would notice he used the word family 20% more than a normal person would, because it was almost guys, this is how I say family. It was trying to really get it out there. It wasn't obvious, but it was just a few more families to be I know what you guys are talking about.
Speaking of families, Brody, we got to talk about the family of coaches.
Yes.
From the, I guess Lane Kiffin considers himself to be part of the Saban coaching tree, I guess.
He picks and chooses. Yeah.
I suppose you could say that. Yeah. And obviously, Jimbo Fisher had some harsh words for Nick Saban over the offseason. I don't know if you guys heard about this. Have you seen this? Had some harsh words. And after the game, Lane Kiffin, after beating Texas A&M to send them further down a bit of a spiral, had some interesting comments. Producer John, do we have that clip for us?
Coach, when there is a kind of war of words between yourself and Coach Fisher and other coaches in the SEC, how does that affect your motivation heading into each week? Is that something that you personally use to kind of push yourself and the team on towards successes like tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I don't give you coach speak, so yeah, that's real. I mean, most coaches say say no, but yeah, that's real. When someone attacks you personally and, calls you and my good buddy Coach Saban, that were both clowns, you take that personal. So, glad we won. I guess I can be a clown for Halloween now.
Seems like
Mwah.
Brody, first of all, I just would like to take a second once again to just be very thankful that the SEC has Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach as head coaches. And not only that, have been in one state. I'm so glad Lane Kiffin is back in the SEC.
And Jimbo, by the way, let's not rule out. Like,
yeah,
he's saying
Jim
stuff left and right. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's so good. Listen, there is certainly a lot of egos when it comes to these coaches, and there's a lot of coach speak outside
And
of
Beamer,
Lane.
by the way, I'm just thinking of all the
Yes.
people who are just saying stuff left and right.
Yeah, Beamer taking shots at Stoops last week.
Drinkwitz will
or
drop
2
a
weeks
dart
ago.
every now and then.
Yeah, the
Yep.
Drinkwitz Darth Vader a couple of years ago. Anyway, but it was very interesting to me because it almost came out of nowhere a little bit, because I had kind of forgotten about it, and I don't necessarily associate Lane Kiffin with Nick Saban because Lane Kiffin has done so many other things in his life. I'd be interested, I don't know Lane well at all, but, the Nick Saban chapter of his life seems like a chapter of his life, and I wonder if he sort of sees that more as a turning point for him. I just think of Lane, there's Raiders coach Lane, and there's USC wonderkind Lane, and
He's
then
Pete
there's
Carroll.
Tennessee,
Pete Carroll
and there's and then there's Tennessee coach Lane, and then there's obviously the Raiders didn't go well, or the USC situation didn't go well for him. Some weird circumstances there, and then he kind of goes to Alabama, and then you see the reboot, and then he kind of gets his swag back at FAU. Now, obviously, he's got Ole Miss absolutely on fire. So I was surprised that he came that hard, like in the post game, even with Kill Cubic on TV. He does that. He reiterates it. Props to Lane again.
Yeah.
Like, honesty is good. Like, if you feel a way, say it. Like, I don't have a problem with Jimbo, going out in the offseason and saying, I don't appreciate them saying we bought every guy, even though that's not illegal. That's for I think there's an ego aspect to it. But it's interesting. Like, Lane, this feels like Tennessee Lane, where he's back, stepping in some fights, and I appreciate it. It makes it more interesting.
I've been been following this for a little bit. Like, Lane Kiffin's in this weird zone. I mean, he's the most outspoken guy on issues right now, kind of. Like, I remember media days, he was just like one of the main guys, just being like, hey, here's exactly what's wrong with NIL, and like, guys are getting bought. Here's what's wrong with all this, and like, he is just kind of outspoken on a lot of stuff. But there's this weird thing with him where it's not like Jimbo, say, being like, I'm upset and I want to get mad, like, I want to yell about this. And it's not even like some other guys where it's like, watch this. There's this level with Lane Kiffin right now of this dry, I just don't care-ness. Like, I don't even feel like it's him trying to be like, watch this. I think he just doesn't care anymore. And you see it all the time, and it's like, he even said, he's like, yeah, a lot of coaches would say, no, it doesn't bother me. But it's like, yeah, it does. Like, it's dry and unemotional. It's like, I mean, after the Kentucky game, when he's like, yeah, Scangarello said, like, send the pressure, I welcome it. Well, we got a lot of pressure on it. It's just like, he's so sick of this, like, era of, like, let's be corporate and good. It's just like, yeah, man. Like, and he's not making it a big thing, though. It's just like, yeah, like, I guess we're all clowns, whatever. And I don't know. I kind of enjoy that.
Yeah, I think there's an honesty to it. I mean, it was the same thing as like the stuff with Tennessee last year, with the golf ball and the mustard bottle, all that stuff. I think there's some coaches that would sort of get sanctimonious and talk about, hey, our players were in danger, which, may have been true, but he's pulling out the golf ball and making light of the whole thing. I believe he caught a water bottle on the way out.
Yeah.
And our friend Elias says he's a very good troll over in the comments. But I don't know that a lot of it is even trolling. I feel like a lot of it is just sort of, taking some things in stride. And
I think that's the better way to put it. Yeah.
Maybe it's a step too far. I don't know that he would say he's defending somebody that maybe he would say that he loves Nick Saban. I guess maybe he would. He certainly helped his career quite a bit. But I think he's just defending somebody. I'm sure, if somebody came after, our bosses, I would that helped, that helped our career. I'd feel some type of way about it as well. And we've done that a time or two over the years at the Athletic. If you come for one of us, you come for all of us. So I think there's an element of that.
Yes.
So
and
either
also,
way,
wait, how much do you think is also not even as directly I'm defending Saban, and it is obviously some of that, but I bet the SEC just fell in the different camps, and I think God, I'm trying to think if I should say this. I think we're finding out that most of the coaches aren't that big of fans of Jimbo. And all these guys are saying all this stuff and they're just like, what are you talking about, dude? I kind of feel like it's a little bit of just, all right, Jimbo, shush. I don't know, even more than I would defend Saban.
Maybe it's possible. It's possible. Speaking of Jimbo, Brody, you're teeing up all these segues. Brody, A&M.
Nick Collison setting screens, baby. That's who I am on this podcast.
With their most encouraging loss of the season, a very expensive loss. We're still paying, $9 million a year for Jimbo to be frantically chasing a bowl game here at the end of the season. But Connor Wigman, Brody, we saw some things. I'm not all in, but for a true freshman to be in that system, which is notoriously difficult, he was doing some stuff. I liked what I saw, leaning on Evan Stewart, who is a bona fide stud. But I like what we saw from Connor Wigman, 5-star guy. I think clearly he's your guy moving forward. Yeah. You haven't seen much of anything out of Haynes King all year. Max Johnson's been hurt, obviously. I mean, Wigman seems like he's the future. We'll see. But especially when you're where Jimbo's at, where, last week I went on Feinbaum. I always get weirded out when people aggregate what you say or trim it down. And there was an ESPN video last week when I went on Feinbaum of A&M, why A&M is bad vibe central. It was running on the video at the top of the page for their players getting suspended and all the A&M stories for the week. And I was like, oh, that's not great. But they have been bad vibe central. Like I said, behind
you said it. It's on the record now. It is no longer being falsely aggregated.
I wasn't prepared for it to get a life to gain a life of its own, but it's true. For as many bad vibes as A&M has had, even in a loss, that your 5-star quarterback shows some stuff, you're kind of like, okay, all right, Connor Wigman, we need to get Ari on here to talk about his love for Wigman. Quinn Ewers was his crush earlier in the season. I think he may have transferred it over to Mr. Connor Wigman. What did you make of
5-star polygamist?
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I thought the offense clearly, even like you said, it was raw. It didn't, some sharpness wasn't there. You'd expect that, but that offense clearly had more punch. There's just no way to go around that. And sometimes it's even the misses just looked better. The misses were beautifully thrown balls that, hey, we're just an inch off or a little too hard, but that's fine. That's going to get better. But so you had an actual threat in on the sideline, downfield a little bit. And you noticed, at least in that first half, you really noticed that open it up for the run game even more. I mean, that first two, they scored the first 2 drives, right? Or 2 of the first 3. And you're like, oh, shoot, this team really figured it out. And yeah, as you'd expect, it kind of cratered and they'll end up losing. But like you said, you come out of that game even though it's a loss to a team that in theory you hope you can beat. It's you come out of that game so much more positive because he does look ready. He does look like a guy who really elevates you. And he looks like a guy who's going to be really, really good, say next year with 5 starts under his belt, 6 starts, and a loaded roster around him. But it's I even saw this
in a new offensive system.
We'll see. But I even saw it happening on that second touchdown drive. I'm like, oh man, they're gonna finish the year 7-5 or 6-6, and we're gonna be like, man, it's looking better, and we're gonna rank them 5th in the preseason again. It's gonna happen. Oh, we do this every time.
You can't hide from the talent. There was an element of let her rip that has not been there.
Perfect way to put it.
Maybe even going back to Kellen Mond, even in Kellen Mond's best year in 2020, there wasn't an element of let her rip. And I think that when you can do that and you make teams A&M has not made teams respect them downfield at all. It's a lot of check down. It's a lot of,
really tough 10-yard passes.
Yeah, run 12 yards and sit in the middle of the zone. We'll hit you, and then you go. Like, everything has just been so hard. And when you have a kid like Evan Stewart, they have put so much on him this season. Oh, you're a true freshman. Please be our leading receiver, our only real downfield threat. And he's answered the bell. Like, he hasn't been consistent every single game, in part because he hasn't had guys to get him the ball.
Yeah.
But we talked about last week, hey, these guys are going to be getting calls in the offseason. It's the portal era. You have to re-recruit your roster. That's the reality. Tampering's going to happen. And when you got Connor Wegman winging you the ball and letting you make incredible one-handed catches in the back of the end zone, if I'm Evan Stewart,
that's a great point.
If I had any thoughts about, man, I don't know if I want to do this for 3 or 4 years, I feel a lot better after Saturday night. And that is a powerful thing. Nothing helps your vibes of your program, the trajectory of your program, more than a young quarterback who shows some flashes. And goodness gracious, did A&M need some good vibes. And
that's a really, really good point. That, like, the way it looks like the season's setting up to end, and God, we are not trying to get ahead of ourselves, but, like, I do think they're probably better than Florida, right? I think they probably beat Florida. And then I think after that, they have they have Auburn after that. They should beat Auburn. Obviously, it's A&M. They're a mess. They could lose both those games. But, like, if then you beat UMass, it's like, okay, 6-6. You win 3 of the last 4. Wegman does look good. I think that's a huge point that, like, you will probably have a buzz around you that will keep a lot of those young guys because they all are friends too. Like, they probably do want to play together more than they don't. That's why they joined this absurd class in the first place, aside from, other things. But so I think that's a really good point. And I mean, he'd look good. I'm in. By the way, Walter says A&M hasn't let it rip since week 1. Wonder if Kenny Trill. You're not wrong, and even that's Kenny Sumlin, baby, Kevin Sumlin. So yeah.
By the way, I ran into Kenny Trill at the AFCA convention in January. And talked to him for a little bit. He's doing good. He was at the time. He was kind of so at the changeover at TCU. He was quarterback's coach, or I believe I can't remember what position he was coaching at TCU under Gary Patterson. And then Sonny Dykes came in and did not retain him, but he ended up getting a job. He's a quality control guy out at Cal. I texted him and said, hey, congrats. Kenny Trill, man, quite a turnaround for him. A great career there at TCU, and now he's moving into coaching. So hopefully that goes well for him. I always listen. With a shout out to the inimitable David Roth. I'm always here to remember some guys, and Kenny Trill. Listen. Love the man. Fantastic college football player. Very, very fun player. Speaking of less fun, Brody, we got to talk about our picks, man. Just a bit outside. We were together on Kentucky keeping it close. They did not. To be fair, we only missed that pick by 24 points. So you're talking about.
I'd rather be. If I'm wrong, I'd rather be wrong, man. Like, especially in the real betting world. Like, if they lost by 15, you'd be so mad. It's like, all right, yep, got it wrong first quarter, move on.
Listen, you were 3 touchdowns and three 2-point conversions away from getting that push. So, next time, maybe. Next time. And then, Brody, you also threw in a bonus pick of A&M plus 2.5.
Did I do 2.5? Yes. Man, I thought it was 3.
Last week,
what a push.
I needed somebody to explain to me why they didn't think Ole Miss was just going to run A&M. They did not win as emphatically as I thought they would, but they were still clearly the better team in that ball game.
Yeah, that's fair.
Nice bounce back from Ole Miss. But, Brody, let's get to this week's picks.
Yes.
Last week was bad. Let's be not bad this week. How about that?
We'd be good coaches, like a halftime speech. Stop being bad.
Guys. Have you? My wife is a therapist, and I always tell her whenever she gets home and we're talking about I said, have you ever considered just telling people to stop doing that?
Yes.
She's like, no, that usually doesn't come up. I'm like, you should try it sometime.
Honestly, like, you don't know it doesn't work yet. I've done this thing lately where I just tell my dog stop being fat, and even though I'm the one giving them too much food. So it's nobody, like, we are the coach saying just be better. Like, hey, stop being fat. And it hasn't worked. Yeah, there's still
too many Blue Oak barbecue chicken sandwiches, I think.
Ooh, yeah, they get some good scraps here for sure. Bulldogs, man.
Brody, what do you got for us this week?
I don't like. I feel like last week I wanted to take 4. This week I don't really like that many, but I'm going to go Mississippi State minus 11.5 over Auburn. Home game. I thought Auburn was going to give Arkansas a better fight than it did last week, and I was kind of like, all right, maybe they're kind of turning it around. They did not. Even that 14 points makes it look a little closer than it was, I feel like. So I think Mississippi State routes. I think Mississippi State kind of reminds everyone like they are pretty good. They are.
Mm-hmm.
So I like them there. It's a good spot. How about you?
Every week I wonder how is Auburn going to move the ball. Tank Bigsby is really good.
He's so good.
And I feel bad for him. It's just a bad situation for him. I like that pick. But, Brody, big number in Tennessee, Georgia, 65.5. I'm taking it over.
I'm with you.
First of all, I certainly Georgia will be able to put some points on the board here. I think they won't be quite as explosive as we've talked about this week. But Tennessee's going to be able to score some points too. I don't know what their team total is. I'm guessing somewhere 28.5, 29.5. I'd look very closely at that as well.
Yeah.
Tennessee might give up 45, but I've said it all year. I don't think anybody in the country can keep Tennessee under 30. And I think that includes Georgia. I think that includes literally everyone. That might include, a number of NFL teams, Brody. But Tennessee is going to put some points on the board in this game. They might give up a bunch, but I just don't see that game staying under. So I'm going to take those big points. Elias says Kentucky minus 2.5 at Missouri feels like it might be an over adjustment.
I kind of agree.
I think Kentucky is just a much better team than Missouri is right now.
I was going to make that mine, but I was too scared because last Saturday was just that ugly where I'm like,
home dogs, man.
Yeah.
Home dogs.
But Missouri's like,
careful.
There's always like, I think it was South Carolina, but now Missouri is officially the leader of the like just weirdly competent all-stars, where it's like no world are we claiming that they're good, but they play everyone competitively. They've had some nice wins. Like it's like Missouri. So that's the only reason holding me back. But by the way, Elias, you have to tell us if we're right because you're asking great questions this week. And we want you back next week. So if we find out we've been saying your name wrong for like an hour, I'm going to never forgive myself. But
we're around.
I am with you, Elias.
I think, this is the same Missouri team that obviously did push Georgia to the brink. Georgia probably should have lost that game. They needed a little bit of magic to get out of there. But I think Kentucky, that's a good pick. I think Kentucky can bully them a little bit. But, yeah. So I'm taking, again, Tennessee, Georgia over 65.5.
I love it, man.
Brody likes 11.5 for Mississippi State. I like that pick. And, of course, our friend Elias, Kentucky 2.5.
Yeah, let's start keeping track of Elias's as well.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a fun week. Appreciate Seth Emerson joining us. Again, we got a lot of good stuff coming. This is a huge week in the SEC, and we will be there to
we got it right.
Well, see, here's what Elias says we got it right. Listen, because Alias, nobody's going to name their child Alias.
You wouldn't think so unless they just huge Jennifer Garden
Yeah,
fans.
Nobody's going to do that because naming your child Alias technically allows them to just call themselves literally anything. Because
maybe if you're just like, I don't know where you're from, but maybe if you're just absurdly Southern, your parents want to name you Alias. Like, Alias coming over. Yeah, like, I like that. But I don't think that's it.
Elias is an actual name, and I thought maybe they just spelled it different. So listen,
that's a cool spelling. I'm all in.
I should get credit for that. Should erase our bad pick last week for Kentucky. So we'll see. But thank you guys again. It's gonna be a huge week. Listen to the Andy Staples Show feed. We'll have plenty of that on the feed and on YouTube here, and then of course on theathletic.com. Subscribe if you are not already a subscriber. I've got some good stories coming up. Brody will have you. Aaron Suttles, our Alabama writer. We're covered all over the place. I will be in Athens this week. Joe Rexford will be there as well. Seth Emerson, of course. Huge week. We got you covered on every angle. So thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you again next week. Brody, we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yes, we are.
Back at 2 massive, massive games and 2 division races that are about to get a lot of clarity. So we'll see you guys. Enjoy the playoff rankings. Enjoy our content. We'll see you next week.